Picture this. You're standing in a forest where dragonflies the size of hawks circle overhead. At your feet, a millipede longer than a grown man slithers through the undergrowth. Behind you, something stirs in the shadows, a scorpion nearly 3 feet long, its venomous tail arched and ready to strike. This isn't science fiction. This was Earth 350 million years ago. A world so alien, so bizarre, that if you could travel back in time, you'd question whether you were still on the same planet. Welcome to the Carboniferous Period, an age when oxygen levels soared, forests burned and regrew like phoenixes, and life experimented with size in ways that defy imagination. If you're ready to explore the strangest chapter in our planet's history, hit that like button and subscribe, because we're about to journey into a world where nightmares were real and giants truly walked the earth. Between 359 and 299 million years ago, Earth transformed into something unrecognizable. Forget everything you know about modern landscapes. No flowering meadows, no grasslands stretching to the horizon, and certainly no dinosaurs. Instead, imagine endless swamps blanketed by towering forests that seem to reach the sky itself. These weren't the forests we know today. Massive club moss trees, called lycopods, soared over 100 feet into the air, their trunks thick and scaled like reptilian skin. Giant ferns unfurled their fronds in the perpetual twilight, while horsetails grew in dense bamboo-like groves, creating a labyrinth where sunlight barely penetrated the canopy. The forest floor remained in near-constant darkness, damp and suffocating, a perfect incubator for life forms that would become the stuff of legend. But the most dramatic difference wasn't what you could see. The atmosphere during the Carboniferous contained between 30 and 35% oxygen, compared to today's 21%. For a time traveler from the present, each breath would feel thick, almost intoxicating, like breathing pure energy. Your heart would race, your senses would sharpen, and you'd feel simultaneously exhilarated and overwhelmed. This oxygen-rich air had another terrifying consequence. It made everything incredibly flammable. A single lightning bolt could ignite entire forests in minutes. These weren't ordinary wildfires. They were apocalyptic infernos that consumed thousands of square miles, painting the sky black with smoke and ash. Yet life adapted even to this. The forests would regenerate within decades, creating a cycle of destruction and rebirth that became as natural as the changing seasons. In this pressure cooker of evolutionary possibility, life exploded in directions never seen before or since. The Carboniferous was nature's boldest experiment, a world where the rulebook was torn up and rewritten in spectacular fashion. If you thought the ground was intimidating, the Carboniferous sky was pure terror, with no birds, no bats, and no flying. Reptiles yet evolved. The air belonged entirely to insects, and they made the most of it. Gliding through the canopy on wings that caught the filtered sunlight like stained glass windows came Palaeodictyoptera, the ancient net-winged ones. With wingspans averaging 16 inches and some individuals stretching beyond 20 inches, these creatures dwarfed any modern insect. They possessed not just 2 pairs of wings, but additional small lobes near their heads, like supplementary stabilizers helping them navigate through the dense forest maze. Despite their imposing size, they were gentle giants, feeding exclusively on tree sap and plant fluids. Watching swarms of these enormous, butterfly-like creatures drift through shafts of light must have felt like witnessing something divine, beautiful, haunting, and utterly alien. But beauty in the Carboniferous was always stalked by death. Enter Meganeura, the undisputed apex predator of the skies. With wingspans reaching 28 inches and bodies over 16 inches long, roughly the size of a peregrine falcon, these were the first true aerial hunters in Earth's history. Their enormous compound eyes provided nearly 360-degree vision, capable of detecting the slightest movement far below. Their legs, armed with sharp spines like rows of fishhooks, could snatch prey mid-flight with devastating efficiency. Meganeura employed two hunting strategies with deadly effectiveness. The first was patience, perching motionless on tree trunks, blending into the bark until unsuspecting prey flew within striking distance. The second was the aerial ambush, diving from above in lightning-fast pursuits that gave victims almost no chance of escape. Their favorite prey? Those harmless Palaeodictyoptera, plucked from the air like fruit from a tree. The secret to their gigantic size lay in their respiratory system. Insects breathe through a network of tubes called tracheae, which deliver oxygen directly to their cells through simple diffusion. In today's atmosphere, this system limits insect size because diffusion becomes inefficient over long distances. But in the oxygen-rich Carboniferous, diffusion worked beautifully, even in massive bodies. If you could somehow transport a Meganeura to the present day, it would likely suffocate within minutes, its oversized body unable to extract enough oxygen from our thinner air. The skies were also home to countless other flying creatures. Primitive mayflies and early relatives of modern grasshoppers and crickets filled every niche. Their collective buzzing, clicking, and wing beating created a constant auditory landscape, a living symphony that never stopped, day or night. The air vibrated with life, thick not just with oxygen, but with the sounds of a world still figuring out the rules of existence. If the skies belonged to giant insects, the forest floor was an arena of even more nightmarish proportions. Every shadow could conceal something deadly. Every step might disturb a creature straight from your darkest dreams. Lurking in the undergrowth was Pulmonoscorpius, the breathing scorpion from ancient Scotland. Modern scorpions, reaching 6 to 8 inches, are already unsettling enough. Now magnify that fear by 4. Pulmonoscorpius stretched up to 28 inches long, approximately the size of a human infant. Its massive pincers, encased in armor harder than most modern plastics, could crush the exoskeletons of other arthropods with sickening ease. And that tail, curved, menacing, tipped with a stinger capable of delivering venom potent enough to paralyze prey several times its size. What made Pulmonoscorpius particularly formidable was its versatility. Unlike most modern scorpions that prefer dry environments, this ancient predator was equally at home on land or in shallow water. It would ambush prey from the murky edges of swamps, lunging with explosive speed to seize amphibians or soft-bodied creatures before they could react. Its multiple eyes, large compound eyes for depth perception and smaller lateral eyes for detecting light changes, made it a supremely effective hunter in the perpetual twilight of the Carboniferous forests. But even a 28-inch scorpion had to yield the path when Arthropleura approached. This was the true titan of the forest floor, a millipede that stretched up to 8.5 feet long and weighed over 100 pounds. Its body consisted of dozens of armored segments, each nearly 20 inches wide, locked together into an almost impenetrable defensive barrier. As it moved through the underbrush, its hundreds of legs working in hypnotic waves, it left distinctive tracks in the soft mud, tracks that paleontologists still find fossilized today, silent testimony to its reign. Despite its terrifying size, Arthropleura was likely a gentle giant. Without a complete skull fossil, scientists debate its exact diet, but evidence suggests it was primarily a detritivore, feeding on the massive amounts of decaying plant matter that littered the forest floor. In a sense, Arthropleura was the Carboniferous' cleanup crew, recycling the enormous quantities of dead leaves shed by the towering lycopod forests. Even so, nothing would dare challenge such an armored colossus. Even Pulmonoscorpius gave it a wide berth. Yet the most significant ground-dwelling creature of the Carboniferous wasn't a giant at all. At just 8 inches long, Hylonomus looked like an unremarkable lizard, easily overlooked among the giants. Unlike amphibians, which had to return to water to lay their jelly-coated eggs, Hylonomus could lay eggs on dry land. These eggs contained a protective membrane that sealed in moisture and nutrients, creating a self-contained aquatic environment for the developing embryo. This innovation was world-changing. It freed vertebrates from their dependency on water and opened the door to conquering the land completely. Hylonomus and its relatives represented the first true reptiles, ancestors of every dinosaur, bird, and reptile that would ever exist. While giants like Arthropleura and Pulmonoscorpius commanded attention, this unassuming 8-inch lizard held the future in its evolutionary grasp. Sharing the forest floor were equally strange amphibians. With flat skulls, sharp teeth, and elongated bodies, they waited in the shadows near swamp edges, using their oversized eyes to hunt effectively at night. They preyed on resting insects and small animals that made the fatal mistake of wandering too close to the water's edge. The murky waters of Carboniferous swamps concealed an entirely different realm of terror. Here, in the darkness below the surface, creatures that were part fish, part amphibian, and part nightmare waited with ancient patience. One of the most infamous was Megarachne, initially misidentified as a giant spider when its fossils were discovered in South America. Early scientists believed it was the largest spider ever to exist, with a body nearly 20 inches long. The thought of a spider that size sent shockwaves through both the scientific community, but decades of research revealed the truth. Megarachne wasn't a spider at all, but a sea scorpion, a eurypterid related to modern horseshoe crabs and scorpions. Even as a eurypterid, Megarachne was terrifying enough. Stretching up to 22 inches long, with paddle-like limbs adapted for stirring up muddy bottoms, it hunted by patience rather than speed. It would bury itself in soft sediment, camouflaged by its dark gray exoskeleton, waiting for prey to wander close. Then it would suddenly churn the mud with its paddles, disorienting victims before clamping down with powerful jaws. Its diet consisted mainly of crustaceans, fallen insects, and small fish, but its crushing mandibles could easily overpower young amphibians or unwary reptiles. If Megarachne was the arthropod nightmare of the water, Proterogyrinus was the prototype crocodile. At 6.5 feet long, with a streamlined body, powerful limbs, and a laterally compressed tail for swimming, it was both swift in water and deadly on shore. It employed classic ambush tactics, hiding among reeds with only its eyes breaking the surface, waiting for insects, primitive frogs, or small reptiles to come for a drink. When prey approached, Proterogyrinus would explode from concealment, seizing victims with razor-sharp teeth before dragging them underwater to drown. Even larger was Crassigyrinus, a massive European amphibian reaching 6 feet in length. It possessed an enormous, flattened head filled with dagger-like teeth, but its body betrayed its limitations: short, weak limbs, poorly suited for walking. Instead, Crassigyrinus was entirely aquatic, gliding through dark swamps like a living submarine. It hunted fish, aquatic invertebrates, and smaller amphibians, lunging with surprising speed in the water but helpless on land. In the murky depths, its grotesque head and massive body must have been the stuff of nightmares. But the true king of the swamps was Aeogyrannus, stretching up to 15 feet long, as large as a modern car. This was one of the largest predatory amphibians of the entire Carboniferous. With its elongated body, thick skin, and formidable teeth, Aeogyrannus dominated rivers and wetlands completely. It preyed on large fish, giant insects that fell into the water, and even juvenile reptiles. Once caught in its massive jaws, escape was virtually impossible. These giant amphibians represented evolutionary experiments in habitat conquest. They were no longer fully fish, yet not fully adapted for terrestrial life like reptiles. They existed in a transitional state, masters of their aquatic domains but ultimately trapped by their reproductive dependency on water, a limitation that would prove fatal when the world began to dry. Nothing lasts forever, and the Carboniferous was no exception. After tens of millions of years, the strange world of endless swamps, giant insects, and colossal amphibians began its slow march toward extinction. Around 305 million years ago, Earth entered a severe ice age. The southern hemisphere, particularly the supercontinent Gondwana, became covered in massive glaciers stretching for thousands of miles. As ice sheets expanded, they locked up enormous quantities of water, causing global sea levels to plummet. The vast swamps that had sustained the Carboniferous rainforests began to dry out and disappear. This event, known as the Carboniferous rainforest collapse, was catastrophic for the giant insects. As humid forests shrank and were replaced by drier woodlands, the giants lost their ideal habitats. Atmospheric oxygen levels, which had peaked near 35%, began declining, stripping away the physiological advantage that had allowed insects to grow so large. Populations of Meganeura and Arthropleura crashed. The thunderous wing beats of giant dragonflies faded from the skies, leaving empty niches that would eventually be filled by much smaller creatures. The giant amphibians suffered even more dramatically. Completely dependent on water for reproduction, they struggled as wetlands vanished. The 15-foot Aeogyrannus and the grotesque Crassogyrannus slowly disappeared from the fossil record. Some smaller amphibian lineages survived by adapting to new conditions, but they never regained their former dominance. Meanwhile, a much smaller group of animals quietly began their rise to power. The amniotes. Thanks to their revolutionary amniotic eggs, they no longer needed water for reproduction. As swamps dried into plains, amniotes like Hylonomus gained a decisive evolutionary advantage. They spread into the newly available drylands, diversifying and adapting, laying the foundation for what would become the Age of Reptiles. The planet itself was changing. The continents slowly drifted together, forming the supercontinent Pangaea. This massive collision raised new mountain ranges, including the Appalachians, and dramatically altered ocean currents and climate patterns. With Pangaea's vast interior cut off from moderating ocean influences, climates became increasingly dry, hot, and seasonal. The humid rainforests that had defined the Carboniferous could no longer survive in this harsh new world. The combination of cooling temperatures, expanding glaciers, falling oxygen levels, rainforest collapse, and continental fusion brought the Carboniferous to its end. The wet, swampy world of giants disappeared, replaced by a harsher, drier planet. From the ashes of those coal forests, forests that would eventually become the coal seams we mine today, a new era began, the Permian period, when primitive reptiles would diversify and eventually give rise to dinosaurs, mammals, and ultimately, us. The Carboniferous remains one of the most alien chapters in Earth's 4.5 billion year story. It was a world where skies buzzed with hawk-sized dragonflies, where the ground trembled under 8-foot millipedes, where murky swamps concealed 15-foot amphibian predators, and where nearly 3-foot scorpions stalked the shadows. But changing climates and collapsing forests closed that extraordinary chapter. The giants vanished, leaving behind only coal deposits and the fragile legacy of amniotic eggs, a seemingly small innovation that would change everything. From those humble beginnings, the world of reptiles and later dinosaurs, mammals, birds, and eventually humans would emerge. It's fascinating to consider. If the Carboniferous had not ended the way it did, would dinosaurs have ever existed? Would mammals have evolved? Would we be here today, capable of looking back across hundreds of millions of years to marvel at a world so different from our own? The giants of the Carboniferous are gone, but their story remains, preserved in coal, in fossils, and in the evolutionary legacy they left behind. They remind us that Earth has always been a planet of change, where dominance is temporary, and where even the mightiest rulers must eventually yield to forces beyond their control. So which creature amazed you the most? The aerial predator Meganeura, ruling skies without birds? The armored titan Arthropleura, the largest land invertebrate ever? The venomous Pulmonoscorpius, lurking in the shadows? Or perhaps the tiny Hylonomus, whose revolutionary egg contained the blueprint for the future? Let us know in the comments below, and join us next time as we continue exploring the mysterious prehistoric past, one incredible era at a time.